Okay, here we go. Welcome into a bright and early crossover episode of Patriots Daily and Patriots Beat. Going around the clock here. Alex, Barth, Mike Kadlick, Brian Hines, Tayler Kyles with you. I don't know why we set it up like this. It should be like, there we go. Patriots. Oh,
there
well,
you go.
Let's match it up with the logos on the top. There we go. All right, Patriots Beat, Patriots Daily. It's a little early in the morning for moving pieces. I get that. Brian has his glasses on. I didn't even know he wore glasses. Like, this has very, like,
a good look.
You know, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I don't feel so alone.
Very, like, meeting up with your friends at the diner vibes. And maybe that's kind of where the show will go. We'll see. We appreciate everybody for tuning in at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. We usually do these shows live after practice, but media flag football game yesterday. I know people want to hear about that, so just get that out of the way real quick. One of the plays of the day. Look, I got to give the play of the day to Tom Curran and Zach Cox. They had that. Zach made that dive-in catch down the field like the first play of the game, but Mike delivered a strike to Tayler in the back corner of the end zone. Tayler went full David Patton, going up, falling backwards to make the catch. And then our producer Amit hurt his knee in the second half, so they had to end the game. The white team, which was not the CLNS team, it was white and black people were wearing. The white team was leading at the time, so they declared them the winner. I know there's some controversy about that, but
Mike was not happy.
Yeah, that's BS. That was disingenuous for them to go on early edition yesterday and call that a W. There was 15 minutes left. That's
I think it should have been no contest. There is historical context to that, but you guys still didn't win.
Yeah, we didn't win,
but we didn't.
But we had the ball. We were gonna go score.
Well,
we had the ball. We're gonna score.
As one of America's great philosophers once said, "If you ain't first, you're last." So,
fair.
It's yeah. All right. That's
Taylor, Taylor, any inside the ambulance fun stories from Amit when you guys were on the way to the hospital? Anything good happen?
I mean, earmuffs if you're sensitive to like body stuff, but so his knee dislocated on the field. When we were in the hospital thing, like there were so many bumps in the road, it actually slid back into place on the way to the hospital. So by the time we got there, he was like, "Oh, okay, I guess I don't need to put it back in." So also, if you're wondering why there was no written recap of the show yesterday, I was so busy. So, as soon as I ended, I went to the hospital, and then I had to go on the show. I felt really bad about that, but yesterday was pretty crazy.
All right, so you'll get it now. We're going to talk mostly about yesterday's joint practice, and we can get into the game tomorrow a little bit as well, but we'll start here. We'll start with you, Brian. The offensive line. And when I say the offensive line, so I'd seen practices before where, going back to last year, we all remember this. The offensive line struggles to the point where you can't properly evaluate the rest of the offense. We've all seen that practice a couple times. This was almost a step further where I felt like the tackles specifically struggled so much, you couldn't even necessarily evaluate the interior. And because I don't want, like, City So, David Andrews, Michael Onwenu, I don't want to say they were good yesterday, but it felt like there were times where they were struggling because they had to not accommodate, but account for so much of what was going on the outside, specifically, mainly the guards, that became like an issue within itself. So as bad as it sounded, thank you, Dakota, as bad as it sounded, it almost was just like two guys that were a big part of it. That's not to say other players didn't have their moments where they struggled, but again, Brian, I don't know if you feel the same way. Like, I think a lot of that really just came down to the tackles, and it doesn't make it better or worse. This is how I feel.
I think, yeah, I mean, they're the main problems, and they've been the guys we've been concerned about, and it was still Vidarian Lowe and Chuks Okorafor, but I mean, Jalen Carter and who's the other big guy? Jordan Davis up there. It's early. Like, they caused some havoc in the interior, but that's what they do. Like, they're two elite players. But yeah, it's the tackles, and it was as bad as we probably all were saying on Twitter yesterday. Like 10 plus sacks. There was the period that the 2 minute that Drake May got a lot of attention, where it just went sack, incompletion, sack. Just had zero chance. So. Yeah, it was mostly on the tackles, I'd say, and that was the concern going into this, and it just kind of laid out exactly like that.
So, Taylor, let me ask you this. How much of that was, because the Eagles' defensive front's one of the best in football, how much of that was the Eagles' defensive front versus, like, the Eagles' defensive front's ability versus the Patriots' offensive line's lack of talent?
I mean, it's got to be a little bit of both, right? I mean, the starting offensive line. Now, the interior, I think, did struggle a little bit, which was discouraging. But I think that kind of lends credence to the fact that the Eagles are just really good. Like, they're going to give Mike Nwenu trouble. They're going to give even City So, as much better as he's been this summer, they're going to give him trouble. But then on the edges, things obviously get a little more dicey. I don't think Vidarian Lowe is terrible. I was saying that on Twitter yesterday. Like, I don't think he's been 2023 bad. I think he's been like just barely fine. But he's also more of a backup. So, I mean, I think it has to be, the Eagles are dominant up front. That's why you saw everybody have a hard time. But also, you've got an okay starter in Chooks and then a guy who probably should just be the top backup at left tackle as your starter. So, there's going to be some trouble. And then the second string offensive line, obviously, outside of Calvin Anderson, there's just so many guys that are either young or don't really end up on 53-man rosters very often. So, that's what's going to happen when you put Drake May back there. He's going to get sacked almost every time he takes a drop back in a 2-minute drill.
Yeah, and I think Andrew Callahan had the sack rate. I don't remember if this was just Drake May or May and Brissett combined, but either way, it's an alarming number. Over 20% for the day yesterday. And look, to answer my own question, I don't think every defensive line in the league could do to the Patriots what the Eagles did yesterday, but there are defensive lines that can. And we saw what happens when this line is really challenged, Mike. And in a game, I mean, that's going to be, you're not going to be able to move the ball if you're blocking like
it's
that.
Going to get, if it looks like it did yesterday, it's going to be that much worse on Thursday when you can actually get to the quarterback and you can actually disrupt an entire play and they don't just either blow something dead or they say, all right, run past the quarterback and let him throw anyway and stuff like that. So you're going to see those sacks, sort of stack up. And to the question of like, is it just the Eagles are that good? Yes, the Eagles front is that good, but the Patriots front is also that good. And they've been struggling throughout, the last couple weeks as well with this sort of line combination. And I wrote about it, or I put it on Twitter yesterday, where the last time they put out a different offensive line combination for starters with Caden Wallace on the left, Chooks on the right.
Yeah.
And then Leverett was in the middle because David Andrews was out. But with City So and Onwenu on the inside, and again, Wallace and Okorafor on the outside, they looked pretty good for those first few days of pads. Like the run game was running smooth. The quarterback seemed to have a little bit more time. And ever since then, they've taken Caden Wallace off that front line and they've added Vidarian Lowe on the left side. And Tayler, to your point, where Vidarian Lowe is a better left tackle than he is a right tackle, but he's also a better backup than he is a starter. And so I wonder, there's sort of been this theory that they're splitting up the lines to kind of give Drake May some Caden Wallace so that, it's almost like there's a 1A and 1B offensive line instead of just your best front five going forward. And I wonder when they finally scrap that and decide to put that, give Caden Wallace a chance on the front line, because it just has not been that good. And so are we going to see that, are we still going to see this offensive line after yesterday, or are they going to kind of change it up and go back to what they were doing, late in July, because that's when they look the best?
All right. So let me ask you guys this quickly. And I say quickly, knowing that that direction never actually applies on this show. Gerard Mayo a couple weeks ago, and I think he's done this multiple times, gave the second preseason game as kind of the cutoff. He was asked, when do you want to have your best five established by? And that doesn't mean it's going to be the group for the whole season, but the way camp works, the reason you kind of heard yesterday talked about the end of camp, even though they still have a week left before that Commanders game, is now you kind of start prepping for week one. There's going to be less of a point on general player development. I mean, you're going to work guys through the playbook and scout team stuff, but general player development is going to be less of an emphasis on. There'll still be an emphasis on evaluation, but it's going to be in a very different setting. You're in a scout team setting now. It's less competitive. So you it makes sense that after this game, you want to know who your starting five are going to be for week one, and then you'll adjust from there as you need to. With how much time they've invested in this tackle pairing, even if it looks ugly in the game, I don't know if they're going to make a change. I think this may be the week one line. Do you guys think this is the week one line, or do you think if it looks as bad in the game as it looked yesterday, we go out for the next practice, which will probably be Saturday or Sunday, and we see a different group up front? Mike, we'll start with you.
I'll go. I think they have to change it up. I really do.
You think they have to, but do you think they will?
Man. I guess, reading it and watching it play out, no, I don't think they're going to do it. I think this is what they're sticking with, but I can't figure out why. because it hasn't been good. And that other 5, which I just talked about, was better. And you saw it play out on the field. And so I don't think they're going to do it because I think they've cemented themselves into low right now. But should they change it? Absolutely.
Taylor.
It's tough. I tweeted yesterday, I think that Caden Wallace should get some opportunities at left tackle. Now, I also say that knowing that it won't fix the entire offensive line. Caden Wallace is going to come with his growing pains. The way I see it, Vidarian Lowe is going to have his pretty bad losses as well. Even if they don't come as frequently as maybe last year, they're going to come. We saw them in the first preseason game. So I don't really understand why you wouldn't put Caden Wallace out there and let him go through those growing pains, but be able to learn from them and improve versus Vidarian Lowe, who is not a part of your future plan in any way unless you want to make him, a backup for the next couple of years. I just think that's really odd. And then there's the fact that I don't want them to mess with the cohesiveness. Like, they've had Vidarian Lowe there for so long. I also don't love the idea of messing with that chemistry and getting City So someone else he's got to work next to. So it's just not an easy it's not an easy explanation. We did think that Vidarian Lowe was going to be a short-term thing. And like Jerome Mayo kept saying, it's going to be a competition. It's going to be a competition. Hasn't felt that way. Kind of like quarterback, where he said that, but it feels like outside of Drake May's one drive in the preseason, I haven't really seen that come to fruition. So, I'm very curious what their perspective is and what they see in Vidarian Lowe. Mayo said he's got great length and he's athletic and all that, but Caden Wallace has much higher physical upside. So, if you're going to go with the guy in your long-term plans and he's going to struggle, sure. If he's so bad, you can put in Vidarian Lowe, and then you also don't want to mess with these young guys' heads. It's a confusing situation. It's layered. I don't think it's as simple as, Caden Wallace fixes everything. But as an outsider, I'd like to see someone who's part of the plan there instead of someone who we know isn't really going to give you great production.
So I'll say this on Wallace. This is just a theory I have, and I wrote this in my mailbag this morning on 985thesportshub.com. I don't necessarily agree with this, but this is my read on the situation. I think he's still with the second unit. So when he's on that second unit, him and Calvin Anderson, they're going back and forth between left and right a lot. I think he's on the second unit because they want to cross-train him, because they want him working at both spots. And it's less disruptive to do that with the second offense than the first offense, which I understand to a point, but what are you cross-training him for? You're cross-training him to eventually take over one of your tackle spots, which right now don't look good enough. So, let's go, right? All right, he's cross-trained. Let's see him somewhere, right or left, probably left at this point with the top unit. Brian, do you think they change the group before week 1, or is it Vidarian Lowe and Chuks Okorafor?
I think they're going to keep it just because, to your points, this has been the tackle pairing for almost 2 weeks now, right? So the one thing that maybe would give me a little bit of hope that they might change it was after that Drake May 2-minute drill. I thought, Gerard Mayo, Alex Van Pelt, and Evan Rothstein kind of huddled up and had a long conversation on the field right after that, sack, incompletion, sack. And I wonder if, that conversation was like, okay, this is bad. We need to make a change or something moving forward. But I would still expect come out to tomorrow, the game, and it's still Vidarian Lowe at left tackle, just because, again, it's been the group for so long. Making a change right now I wouldn't count on it.
And I'll just throw these two in, a couple questions that I think are worth addressing here. Talking about we're coming after the coaching staff. I actually don't think this is primarily a coaching problem. It's not like they're not playing well. You look at the coaches to an extent, but it's more a personnel problem. It's the guys they have. This goes to Elliott Wolf and Matt Groh in the front office. And I was at the front of this group that they didn't do enough to address tackle in the offseason. Chuks Okorafor was not a real answer at left tackle. I like Caden Wallace as a developmental right tackle, and probably a step below the level of prospect this team needed in that spot. I don't want to say it's not an indictment on the coaching staff, because obviously when the team's not playing well, it's never on a singular person. But I view this more as a personnel thing than a coaching thing. I'll answer this other one, and then you guys can respond to either. Yeah. Is there any reason they're not trying Layden Robinson at guard, Mike Onwenu at tackle? I wouldn't be surprised if we see this at some point. Like last year was week 6 before they kicked Mike out to tackle. I think Mike Onwenu is a much better fit for the scheme at guard. And I think they maybe worry about his fit at tackle. And yes, they should have known that when they signed him and all that. I get it. 2, like you said, the interior hasn't been bad. And I wonder if there's a worry at this point of, okay, these 3 work. And interior pressure is a lot more daunting for a young quarterback than edge pressure. we have a group in the middle we like. Let's just not touch that and see if we can figure out the tackles without disrupting the three we have. So I'll open up the floor to you guys if you disagree with anything I just said, but two common questions I've been getting about this whole offensive line situation.
Tayler, you've nailed it on the head with Onwenu since they re-signed him, that he is a great guard and he's a good tackle. And I think that's what they see. And I think that's why they've done what Alex just mentioned and kept that, those three down the middle the way they are and worry about the tackles from there. And I want to go back to another point you made, on the last sort of roundabout here, Tayler, where it looked like a competition at tackle and they were rotating those guys in. It was every 4 practices or something like that. We saw Anderson, or 2 or 4, whatever it was. Anderson got a couple, then Wallace got a couple. Okorafor was first. And then Vidarian Lowe comes out. And again, you tweeted it yesterday, and I feel like I'm kind of using a lot of, your stuff to make my points here, but you
have an original take, Mike.
No, but I'm using it to piggyback onto a take. Is you tweeted the thing where everyone's bagging on Vidarian Lowe, and it shouldn't be this way because it's not just him; it's a trickle effect with the whole line. And I agree, and I'm not trying to just bag on the guy, but it looked good before Lowe came into the picture, and then they had those 5 come in. And it hasn't been great, and yet they haven't rotated and kept the competition. So I wonder what they see in that 5, and it continues to not make much sense to me at all. And so I don't know what the plan is, I guess. And I just think it's strange that was the end-all be-all where, all right, let's rotate them through. We'll end on Vidarian Lowe at left tackle, and we'll keep it that way for 2 weeks. I'm kind of mind-boggled, and I don't see where this is going to end up going. And I think it is a personnel problem just as much as a coaching problem. I agree, Alex.
Any other offensive line thoughts? Taylor, go ahead.
Yeah, so I disagree on the offseason part because, one, this wasn't a good free agency period for tackles. Like, this wasn't last year where I didn't love the fits either because I felt like there were a lot of guys who were going to get overpaid. There were a lot of zone blockers, guys who weren't very good in pass protection. For the most part, I was proven right. Like, Juwan Taylor's fine for the Chiefs, but, I think the rest of those guys weren't really a great fit for the Patriots. Now, this year, I thought Chuks was one of their better options considering he's a young guy. Jonah Williams, if you just want to look at the numbers, he and Jonah Williams were comparable last season. It was not this massive divide. Chuks was actually better when you look at run blocking. Jonah Williams also is still a right tackle now that he's with the Cardinals. So I don't think they had many options in free agency. The draft, I think we can maybe debate. They could have taken a tackle instead of Jalen Polk. But then we're having the conversation of, oh my God, all they have is Demario Douglas as a consistent receiver because Jalen Polk has been the only other guy who's really given the offense juice on a consistent basis. So then it's just kind of the same conversation but flipped around. And I don't think Caden Wallace is the problem. I think Caden Wallace is more than athletic enough to play left tackle. It's just going to be about, obviously, like he's a young guy. You got to bring him up to the speed with the NFL. So I think the way they addressed it in the offseason was fine. I just don't think this was a good offseason to need a tackle. And we saw that. And in terms of moving Mike Onwenu around, my hesitation to moving him at guard at first was the fact that guards pull a ton in Alex Van Pelt's scheme. And I don't really like Mike Onwenu having to move around. I like him being able to down block. But now that he's back at guard, I'm like, yeah, I don't want him to move anymore because Chuks has played right tackle. We've seen years of it. He is an NFL starter. He's a replaceable starter. He's not a guy that you have in your plans for 4 years, but he's a guy who's a pretty good stopgap. Left tackle was an experiment. Didn't work. Now he's back at the right. So from city so down, you have guys who are comfortable where they are and have a history there. Really left tackle is that one spot you really need to get figured out. Maybe they just say, hey, Vidarian Lowe's got NFL experience. Scott Peters can coach him up enough that he's not going to be a massive liability. And again, we've seen that. He hasn't been as bad as he was last year. Preseason had some very ugly reps. There were 3 losses where you're like, yeah, that's what you expect out of Vidarian Lowe. It's going to be ugly. But then he had some where you're like, all right, yeah, that's fine. You can get away with that. So I'm honestly not sure how much more the team could have done outside of maybe being more aggressive in the draft at tackle, although we know they reportedly tried to trade up for Tyler Guyton. I don't know how they saw the other guys as fits because we didn't really hear about those fits other than like Blake Fisher. So, yeah, I think they did the best they could. I just think it's really hard to find good offensive linemen in the NFL. It's a conversation that I feel like we always tiptoe around where it's like, oh my God, the line's hurt. We're screwed. This team sucks. It's like, no. Most teams don't have very good offensive lines because they don't have a lot of time to practice, and there's not a lot of kids who play offensive line. So they're not really trickling up to the NFL level in terms of like these really great athletes. And if 1 or 2 of your guys go down, yeah, your offensive line is going to struggle. So, I just wanted to kind of put those out there because I feel like the offensive line conversation, like these are wide receivers where they grow on trees. It's very, very hard to put a good quality offensive line together. It's going to take years of probably adding resources. They made the right steps. I think next year is when I think they're going to be in position to maybe push themselves and get that receiver and get that tackle where this offense is really competitive.
Yeah,
I'll
somebody
just
had.
add,
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
with
No, go ahead.
with the coaching staff and even the front office, do you think there could be like a disconnect there? Because they draft Caden Wallace and Elliott Wolf tells us immediately he's a left, like he can play left tackle. And then all offseason we hear draft and develop. We're going to play the young guys, right? That's the Packer way.
Yeah.
That's the Elliott Wolf way. He even tells us Chuks Okorafor can start at left tackle. And now we get out here and neither of these guys are playing right tackle. So do you think there maybe could be a disconnect there, or they just got out here and everyone's in now agreement that neither of these guys can start at left tackle immediately? Do you think anything there, or?
Well, I mean, it can be both.
Yeah,
I think there probably is an element to both where Elliott Wolf had a vision and the vision maybe isn't playing out the way he expected it to. And the coaches have to make a choice. Do you kind of force it and go with the plan and hope it all comes together, or do you adjust on the fly? And I think this probably falls into adjusting on the fly. So, yeah.
Wasn't Keith Wallace and Scott Peters pick? That's what we heard, that he liked Caden Wallace and like he and Alex Van Pelt signed off on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible too. That it just, I mean, and that's where that kind of just on the fly thing, maybe they all thought he could play left tackle and they got out. Like, I do think you have to give a team credit. And this is something that they did the last few years that killed me. Something didn't work and they would just bang their heads against the wall, hoping it would just eventually, like the switch would flip, and it never did. And if they identified that it wasn't going to work and they adjusted away from it, I do give them credit for that. The problem is their plan A was more realistically a plan B. So what they're adjusting to now is a little scary. And that goes back to the overall personnel of it, of even if you like Caden Wallace as a left tackle, understanding the risk that comes with trying to have a player make that kind of move and being ready for it. That's where I would hesitate. And Tayler, to your point, like I get it was a tough season to add linemen. I still might have added Jonah Williams just because he's experienced.
Also, would he want to come here? We have to put that into the equation. So,
well,
Tyron Smith. Everyone throw a bag at
Tyron Smith wasn't coming here.
Didn't Jonah Williams go to the Cardinals though? Like,
yeah, Arizona.
I
don't think Arizona has.
I know they're on the rise, but they at least got a quarterback where you know what you got in him. You know what I mean?
I also don't think Arizona has income tax.
Oh, that's good.
If they do, it's definitely lower than it is here. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know how that stuff works.
This whole thing is such a strange conversation because it's like you kind of toe the line between this has to be a slow rebuild and you have to let it play out. And fans want to see the Patriots win immediately because they're so used to it. And they've already gone through, this is like the second rebuild since, the Brady years. And so it's like, all right, now it's time to ramp it up. And with a disconnect between, the front office and the coaching staff, I think a disconnect could be the right word right now, but it's also just growing pains because it is year one of a brand new sort of a brand new operation here, right? Belichick was involved in everything for so long and everything ran through him. And now it's like, they just kind of have to feel it out. And so people are going to be super disappointed, including myself, with the offensive line yesterday. It was a train wreck. There's no reason to tiptoe around that. And it could be really ugly this year. And they might have to, frankly, eat another season. And I've said it, for the last couple weeks where this is going to be a 2025 team. They need to use this year, figure out what they have, figure out what they don't have, let Drake May develop, and then sort of see what's going on next year. Prove who Drake May is. To Taylor's point, where players don't want to come here, maybe you see that Drake May can be pretty good, and then next year you can land your big fish in the wide receiver thing. And maybe as far as Jonah Williams or a Tyron Smith, right? Tyron Smith or a guy of his caliber might want to come here next season because, this is Houston Texans-esque. And not that the Patriots are going to make the postseason this year, but they're going to see that there's building blocks in place and I can be that next one to take them to that next level. So it's tough to have to wait another year, but I think that's just kind of where we are at this point. They're not going to probably be a very good team this year, and it's probably going to start from the inside out.
And just to finish my point on the tackles, I get that there maybe wasn't a ton in free agency, but I would have been, I more aggressive in the draft. I know they were aggressive, but more aggressive in the draft. And to Taylor's point earlier, if they sacrifice Polk for a tackle, I think it's better for Drake May's development if he has time to throw to guys that aren't open than if he has no time to throw to guys who are. So that's just my philosophy. Also, Arizona does have an income tax. It's 2.5 flat rate. Massachusetts rate starts at 5 and goes up. So there is an income tax in Arizona, but it's half or less than what it is in Massachusetts.
The tough part about being a rebuilding team, though, right, with so many holes is what do you do? What do you fill first? Is it
Right.
tackle? Is it wide receiver? And if they flipped it, right, and say there was time, but everybody was, mashed in coverage and couldn't get open, we'd just be having an opposite conversation right now. So it's just, again, it's something that you kind of going to have patience with here.
All right, we've done half an hour on the
comment in the chat real quick because like the media being impatient. One, I think fans and media are both very impatient, but I think one disconnect between maybe the team and us outsiders is the team seems like they are putting all these veterans in position to earn these spots. And I think just have like a stable offense, because obviously that's what's most fair for the entire team. As fans and as media, you don't really want to have to put up with another season where you have these guys who are on one-year deals, maybe not doing as much, because if you have Drake May as a starter, Caden Wallace as a starter, Jalen Polk as a starter, like we mentioned, the growing pains are going to happen. People are going to have a lot more patience with a rookie than they will with a veteran who is either not doing his job well enough or doing it just barely well enough, and the team still isn't doing very well. So I just want to say that one part where I think that a lot of where we disagree with the coaching staff is I think they just want a functional team, which is why I don't think Drake May should be the week 1 starter. I don't necessarily mind Vidarian Lowe as the top left tackle early on. I just don't understand why we haven't seen it be more competitive and see guys really mix in so we can see side by side how these guys compare.
All right, we've got half an hour talking about the offensive line. Let's hear from our friends at, remind me?
Game time.
Game time.
Game Time. I didn't know which one we were doing first. I know Game Time's a sponsor. Let's hear from our friends at Game Time, and then we'll talk about the quarterbacks. Am I playing it? I thought you guys played it.
I don't have it.
Oh, is this the one you have to read?
Game time
No.
is the authorized ticket mart. No, there's a video.
There's a video. Hold on. I don't know where it is.
I got it.
I
It's
see
the
a
dog
bunch
days
of
of summer here in Boston, which means it's time to get to some games over at Fenway Park. This baseball season, I'm using Game Time to land my Red Sox tickets. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which means getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. It's super easy. You just open the app, click sports, and the games will be right there for you. Right now, you can get tickets to the Rollin' Red Sox for as low as $11. You can even buy parking for the game and check out your seat view right in the app. With Game Time, you can save up to 60% by buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy shows, theaters, and more. Get the lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, let's talk about the quarterbacks because, again, the offensive line, everything that happened was a product. What are you guys laughing at? Oh, whoops. Everything that happened was a product of the offensive line yesterday. I think we need to say that. But you could still try to evaluate the quarterbacks from what you saw individually. So Drake May was perfect in 7-on-7 early on, and he looked good, and he kind of picked up where he was yesterday, throwing with anticipation. Then the offensive line got in front of him, things broke down, and he really struggled to, that's somewhere you'd like to see him elevate a little bit. And the protection's not always going to be that bad, but a guy that's as athletic and mobile as he is, be able to create when things are breaking down around him, Tayler. And it just all seemed like a lot for him yesterday.
It's tough, man. There were so many plays where both of the quarterbacks were clearly going like pretty deep into their progression. That's one thing with the sacks I think we should also kind of throw in there is that there were coverage sacks mixed in as well. There were several times where you could see, like with Austin Hooper, how many times did Jacoby Brissett find him as like the second or third read? So it's so hard to judge. Frankly, Drake May, I think he had like a wide miss in the flat. Other than that, I thought he was fine. It's so... I know we can say we can try to evaluate them considering this supporting cast and take that out of it. I just don't really know how you can because you had like the long pass to Javon Baker, the second one, where Javon Baker kind of tracks it funny and then he commits OPI, things like that, where you're like, I don't even know if it was an accurate pass, because we didn't see how Javon Baker would have just caught it if he had run it normally and tracked it well. So I still think Drake May has been fine, and it's why I want to see him mix in with the ones, because it's like, yeah, we know he can, pick apart the twos as much as he wants. And Jacoby Brissett hasn't been so bad that he should be replaced. Like, his decision-making has been on point. That's something with both of these guys. I think you're not going to have to worry about turnovers the way you did with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi last year, where it's like, they're going to turn it over at least once. They're probably going to turn it over twice. You're just going to kind of have to deal with it. And then that puts you way behind the 8 ball. And then Jacoby, with him, it wasn't just the offensive line too, it's the receivers. I thought he looked really good at times, and the receivers couldn't come through for him. Like it happened a couple times with Austin Hooper. There was also that one time, this was maybe one of the few bad decisions Jacoby Brissett has made this camp, where he throws a Jalen Reagor, and he is very well covered, and Reagor kind of bailed him out by catching a ball that went through the defender's hands. So I don't know. I really want to give the straight quarterback evaluation. I thought Jacoby Brissett wasn't great. He was okay. I thought Drake May was fine, but it's really hard when it felt like some link in the chain was always broken on some play, whether it was an inaccurate throw, a drop, a penalty, a missed blocking assignment. It was just so many things that factored into it. But yeah, the quarterbacks weren't a ton better, although Drake, I kind of give him a pass because of how bad it was.
Yeah, it was no sugarcoating it. It was hard to evaluate the quarterbacks yesterday because there was really, in 11s, there was no time. I thought early on in one-on-ones, Drake May was like, he had to get the nerves out of him and was super erratic. There was 3 straight, his first 2 or 3 one-on-ones were high, low, inside, outside, not great balls. And then he comes back and he hits, I think it was Javon Baker down the sideline. I think it was Polk over of someone, I forget. It was a perfect ball, and he kind of got his stuff together after that. He was perfect in 7-on-7, like you guys mentioned. So I thought it was nice to see him bounce back from that, where early I was like, oh boy, is he kind of in over his head with this joint practice here. As far as Jacoby Brissett, I mentioned on Sunday that I thought Sunday was his best practice of camp because, look, we know he knows the offense. We know that he knows where to go with the football because he's been in it. And I think that's why he's a good person to have ahead of Drake May. And on Sunday, he was making the decisions, he was making the reads, and he was putting the ball right where he wanted it. He was very accurate. The offense looked rather smooth on Sunday. And I thought yesterday with the Eagles, it was basically the opposite, where he still knew where to go with the football. He was still putting it in places when he could and when he had time, but he was really erratic as his accuracy wasn't there. I thought there was a couple plays even where I thought Austin Hooper had a pretty good day at tight end for, when they could make the connection. And a lot of times he was making athletic catches to kind of bail Jacoby Brissett out a few times. So that's sort of as much as I could take away from the quarterbacks. It'll be interesting. Either one of you, I forget, Alex or Taylor, mentioned that Drake May's sort of calling card or whatever is the fact that he can extend plays and make stuff happen ad lib, right? That's hard to tell if it's going to actually be a thing or actually work when you can't hit the quarterback and you kind of have to touch off, right? And so if we get more Drake May reps on Thursday where, yeah, things break down, but he can run and go get 5, 6, 7 yards, or he can, throw across his body and hit Jaheim Bell in the numbers or something like that. Those are the types of things where you really just need live action to see if it's going to play out that way.
And he mentioned that yesterday in his press conference. He said, like, it's tough in the red jersey out here, where in the game, we'd write it down as a sack, but he said in a game, he's going to break out in the pocket and make one of those, plays we saw him make at UNC all the time. So that's why he needs to play more than 6 snaps in the preseason this week, hopefully. And hopefully it's behind that offensive line so we can get a full evaluation. Because, Mike said we can't it was hard to evaluate him yesterday because, he's getting sacked all the time, or, he starts 10 for 10 and then, his next incompletions, like he has to dirt a screen pass.
Yeah.
Javon Baker has 2 offensive pass interferences. So, but it's been a kind of consistent throughout this whole summer with that second unit, with the pressure, with, backup tight ends dropping passes, Mitchell Wilcox. Like, the whole evaluation has just been hard, which is why I don't get Gerard Mayo has been preaching competition. And I don't know, it doesn't look like a quarterback competition because Jacoby Brissett's taken every single rep in practice with the starters. And I think Drake May, not that Jacoby's been horrible, right? As Taylor said, he's getting through his progressions well. The accuracy is sporadic, but that's just kind of who he is as a player. It seems like he'll still hit some deep shots, but Drake May, like, the fundamentals have been improving under center. The footwork looks much better. The accuracy looks improved. And then he can, in game action, he can get out and make those plays. So I don't know. I would love to see him get reps with the first unit. And if you're scared of doing it in game, like practice is the time to do that. It's a controlled setting. He's not going to get hurt in the red jersey. And that's not even to say he has to then start week 1, right? Because if the O-line is a mess and you want Jacoby out there and you want to take it slow, that's fine. But I think you're just kind of hurting the evaluation process right now, not getting him practice reps at least with the starters right now.
Yeah, and at this point, to me, and this goes to what we talked about at the beginning of the show with the offensive line, they're kind of past the point of no return on that. Because now you got to start getting ready for week 1. And look, he's not going to be the week 1 starter.
Nope.
At this point, he shouldn't be. You're doing him a disservice at this point if he's the week 1 starter. And this isn't necessarily his fault for a lot of the reasons Brian mentioned. He's not going to be ready to start week 1. If he starts week 1, they're forcing him in there. I think, do we all agree on that? So
yes.
You got to start getting Jacoby Brissett ready. He needs the reps with the ones. You missed that opportunity. Now maybe he goes out there and reps a bunch on Thursday, but even then, that's one game. So it does feel like.
And I feel like Gerard Mayo's comment about this being a competition is what makes this frustrating. If he had never said that, then we'd probably be saying, okay, you want to get Jacoby Brissett ready for week 1, get as much chemistry as he can. That makes sense. The competition part of it is just like, okay, well, did you lie? Like, what is going on there? Because as Brian mentioned, it's not a competition. He's repping with the 2s consistently. So if it was just getting Jacoby Brissett, awesome. But it doesn't make sense because of that one comment that kind of threw everything off.
And I think he just wanted to cover all his bases and not say anything and box them into Jacoby. Because if he said it's not a competition, Jacoby's our week 1 starter, and Drake May did come out here and kick ass and was, throwing darts and making all this stuff happen, then they put him in there. It's, well, you said that Jacoby was your week 1 starter, and then he has to go back on himself.
And they've emphasized several times that he was the starter. Like the beginning of summer, they could not have been more clear that Drake was not very close.
Everything they've done outside of that one comment, Taylor, has suggested there's not a quarterback competition. And I wonder if, I don't want to say butchered's not the right word, but do you remember last year when Bill said all of our quarterbacks are out here competing when asked about Mac being the starter? And some people ran with that as there being a quarterback competition, even though on the field it clearly wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, and you're getting into semantics here, but that's kind of what you had to do with Bill Belichick at times. When Bill said everybody's out here competing, he basically uses competing in that context as participating. If you're out on the field, you're participating. Because the idea is if you're out there, you're competing for something. Guy 1 to guy 90, you're competing for your job. You're competing for a spot on the roster. You're competing to get better. Everybody in some way is competing. I wonder if Gerard Mayo was trying to do the same thing with his comment, and the phrasing took it. And maybe that's too far into semantics, but that's just, I don't know. I think that it's clear there's no quarterback competition. And I would say I'm okay with that. I'm okay that there wasn't, frankly. I'd still like to see them do more for Drake May, but there was no need to rush him in. And I don't think he ever popped to that extent with the second unit. Now, maybe there's external reasons he didn't, but I don't think he ever popped with that second unit to the extent that he forced one.
I do still think that if there isn't a quarterback competition, it's still okay to give your backup quarterback reps.
Yeah, and that's where
and they haven't done that.
To mix a couple in.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
I wonder if they're just worried or scared of doing that in fear of Drake May gets out there and kind of lights it up and then maybe forces their hand, right? Like that's what Gerard Mayo said. Like he's got to light it up.
I agree with you, Taylor. It's a good thing. That's it.
I know, but they've been just so consistent that they want to take it slow with him. And again, like Jacoby's pro ready. I agree. I think it would be a great thing if Drake May goes out there and lights it up. But I wonder if they just don't want that to be, an external factor, because then it gets back to, the defense is seeing it and they're like, how are we benching this guy? And maybe that could create a problem. So I wonder if they're just kind of scared of that right now.
What I would say to that, one, if you find out he's your better quarterback, that's not a bad thing.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And 2, even if he is, and you still don't think he's ready, because there could be, to qualify that, the disconnect of he looks really good on the practice field, but what they're seeing behind the scenes is he's still not ready. And that could be possible too.
But then that would go against everything they've said. They have been showering him with praise, and like praise that you don't need to give if he's not doing well. But then you just give generic lines. But they've been saying like, no, he gets through his reads quickly. He's like putting all the work.
But just to play this out, right? If that was they're seeing something not on the field that they don't want to start him yet. They're going to have it is going to be tough to manage this kid. That comes with drafting a guy where they drafted him, especially a guy who's a little bit more of a project. There's going to be external factors. Like, if they start 0-4, there's going to be plenty of noise regardless of what Drake May looks like in practice. Mm-hmm. And is the stadium going to be a little more empty than they want it to be? And are they going to start hearing from ownership? And even if Drake May didn't light up in practice, are you going to have players on the defense or other coaches saying, why don't we give the kid a shot? You got to have your plan and you got to stick to it. And that's not going to be easy.
So
Alex
here's where there's
C.C. McCartney and Gerard Mayo, and I think it's in that order, are going to have their plan for Drake May. And if they believe that's the best plan, they should stick to what they think is the best plan, because the fans being angsty or us being angsty doesn't change what's best for Drake May. And this is just going to be a challenge for this new coaching staff to handle.
Here's the tough part too, is the Packer way, right? Sit this guy, develop him, and let him learn behind a starter for a year at least, right? That's easier said than done. And I agree that it looks like that's what they're doing. That's easier said than done when you have Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers ahead of your young guy.
Right.
Where even if you do start, if you start 0-4, like you mentioned, Alex, you can still trot Brett Favre out there for week 5 because it's Brett freaking Favre and it's Aaron freaking Rodgers.
If you have Brett Favre,
but those are Rodgers teams went 8-8 at one point. So say you're 2-2, what have you, and he doesn't look great, but it's still Aaron Rodgers. So you don't really have to bend the knee to ownership or the fans or the clamoring for the young guy. Where when it's Jacoby Brissett, it's like you don't have the luxury of just saying, well, it's Jacoby Brissett, just let it play out, So they want to do it, and Van Pelt probably wants to do it. He's grown up in it. Elliot Wolf, obviously under his father and all that, but it's much harder when it's Jacoby Brissett, who doesn't have the pedigree of those other guys.
Real quick, there was
last thing on the quarterbacks. I mean, we've spent how long on 2 positions here? I get there too.
I mean, but that's what people want to talk about.
No,
that's what yesterday was about too.
Yeah, it was. I just want to make sure, got to drive the bus here, got to facilitate as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Want to make sure we get some other things. But
so
Tayler, go ahead, wrap us up here.
I think we all understand there's a development plan. It's just when you are not giving your 3rd overall pick quality reps, that's the issue. I don't think anybody is saying trot Drake May out there week 1 or even in the first month of the season. I don't think that we're like standing, or at least in this, show.
Nobody rational is saying that.
Right. I think the issue is that you're getting this guy, again, I keep going back to this 2-minute period because it was insane to watch. He had no quality opportunities to hold on to the ball, get through his reads, or make plays. That's counterproductive. And that's where it's like, your backup offensive line is very bad. Maybe you just mix him in with some guys who can give him some level of stability. And obviously, it wasn't great with Jacoby Brissett either. And I'm curious what you guys think about this one thing as well. Obviously, it's Alex Van Pelt's and T.C. McCartney's plan. But the organization was very heavy on the fact they wanted to do better than what they did with Mac Jones. Surrounding him with talent, not necessarily forcing him out there if they didn't need to. I think maybe there's some trepidation in that we don't want to have another Mac Jones problem and put him in a bad spot where maybe he is overwhelmed. But I don't think Drake May cerebrally is that far off from Mac Jones. And if there is a gap, I think physically he can make up for it because he can do things that Mac could never do. Like Mac Jones went out there, started, and was fine his rookie year. He made freaking Pro Bowl as an alternate, but still, he wasn't sniffing a Pro Bowl in his other 2 seasons with the Patriots. So I wonder if they're really afraid of having another Mac situation where they kind of rush things a little bit. And now it's getting to the point where it's like, I don't know if you need to put the training wheels on him to this degree. But again, that's not to say he should start or anything. I just want to see the guy get some opportunities to show what he's got with and against quality players.
Quickly on that, having the ghost, as Holly said the other week, the ghost of Mac Jones hovering over Gillette Stadium. I feel like that's just the idea of that, right? And I'm not saying that that's what Drake May was. I'm using it as in a different inference where if you're always thinking about Mac Jones and don't do it like Mac Jones and don't let it happen like Mac Jones, he's going to turn into Mac Jones. It's like when you're a quarterback and it's don't throw an interception here. Don't throw an interception here. If you're a golfer, don't shank this drive. Don't shank this drive. You're going to throw the interception. You're going to shank the drive. Like this is new. This is different. It's a different player. It's a different regime. Play it how you think you should without having the thought of the other guy always in the back of your head.
There are things to be learned from the Mac Jones situation, but you can't. at a certain point, you gotta let Drake May go out there and sink or swim.
Mhm.
At a
Like the
certain point,
weaponizing stuff's been great.
it's not like, an action figure that you just keep in the box so it never loses value, right? At a certain point, you got to take the toy out and it's a toy, play with it. So it's just a matter of finding when that time is. All right, Mike's got something to tell you guys about here. I will say, as he pulls that up, because I'm sure he wasn't ready, 1,700 people. 1,700 people watching across all our streams on a 9 a.m. on a Wednesday.
It's pretty good.
The audience is strong. We appreciate you guys.
No one's
Love
working right now.
No one's working. This is like March Madness here. We even got you got 4 games on to March Madness. We got the 4 boxes. We went quad box today. So appreciate everybody who's tuned in for this one. And we got some more. So don't leave yet. That's not me signing off. But Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active users. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks, turning $10 into $1,000. And if you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has you covered every week, from lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fee back on Fridays if your lineup loses. Yes, the NBA Finals are over, but the hoops action doesn't stop on Prize Picks. Women's basketball is still heating up with stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves, along with veterans Brianna Stewart and Asia Wilson. Again, you can win up to 100 times your money watching them ball out in the WNBA. Now that the summer games are over, you can head over and watch some women's basketball. Prize Picks is available in over 30 states across the country. And that's Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks apps today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
All right, Taylor, you were on BST last night with Felger. You made a point to tell him what you thought of Jalen Polk.
Yeah, man, he was awesome yesterday. How about you? Want me to go in? I thought I cut you off.
No, we're talking receivers here. Kick us off.
Yeah, so we had the one play from Drake May that we mentioned earlier where he made like the extending grab to haul that one in. I know Mike and I were looking at it and I'm thinking, oh, this is tough. Like, if it gets broken up, I'd understand it's good coverage because the defender was able to get an arm in there a little bit. Still made it. There was the other play that Drake May admitted he could have given him a better ball on a slot fade. I think it was during like 7-on-7s or team drills. And then in 1-on-1s, Jalen was like torching people. Mike Pellegrino told us we don't put too much stock, into these 1-on-1s for corners. If you get beat inside, most of the time we're assuming there's a post safety. It's not a big deal. He turned one Eagles corner like completely around. It was bad. Had him thinking he was going outside and then came back inside. It's like, okay, yeah. And those kind of reps, that's a really good sign. So Jalen Polk is someone I think needs to be a consistent starter. I don't understand what the fixation is with Tyquan Thornton, because I don't think he's been bad this camp. I think it's been maybe his best camp since rookie season. It's his 3rd camp. But we saw like he had one target where Darius Slay had a step like right behind him. The ball's a little bit behind, but it's very catchable and he doesn't bring it in. And when Tyquan Thornton's open, he's fine. When he's not, he doesn't make those tough grabs. And I think for a quarterback, you don't have as much faith throwing to a guy like that if it's not just a go ball. Jalen Polk can give you some of that downfield production. He's not Tyquan Thornton, but we can clearly see he's a guy where if he's even, he's leaving. And he's a good route runner, and he's actually a more competitive player. So if it ends up being Polk, KJ Osborne, Demario Douglas, there's no true X there, but I don't think you have an X on your roster if you can stick out there and be like, yes, I am confident in this guy. Even Javon Baker, he's had great moments, but he's also had a lot of missed opportunities. But Jalen Polk, put that guy with the starters. Like, enough is enough.
Brian, Mike, anybody stand out to you yesterday skill position wise, or what'd you think of the rookies?
Pop Douglas was still awesome yesterday, which is just, it's just good to see still against another team, another competition, even though we saw that.
Let's highlight specifically who he beat most of the day. It was Quinion Mitchell, who's the first round pick.
Yep. So he was awesome. I think, 5 catches in team drills. And then Austin Hooper, like 13 targets, 7 catches, drew a pass interference too, had a touchdown. He did have one weird one that Brissett threw him open and then he went to the ground and it popped up and it resulted in an interception. But Hunter Henry was out. Gerard Mayo said it's not going to be a long-term thing, which is good to hear. But, Austin Hooper stepped up. Jacoby Brissett's loving himself some tight ends. So Austin Hooper was, their most consistent pass catcher yesterday.
Yeah, those are my guys. Pop. I was gonna let you have Pop, and I had Hooper in the back pocket, and then you snuck him in there, Brian. So yeah, I thought, no, you're good. Hooper's been good. I think he's been good all camp. Really, he's someone who's surprised me a little bit. He has knowledge of the system, but I think too, with Hunter Henry being out the last couple of days, he's stepped up a little bit as tight end one and show that he can still be a viable pass catcher in this league. So.
Yeah, for me, I mean, you guys hit on most of them. Ramondre Stevenson, I thought looked good. And as much as we bemoaned the offensive line for about 30 minutes there, I actually thought they were able to open some holes in the ground game. And it hasn't been as bad running the ball. I know like everybody's rolling their eyes at that. Great, we're going to run the ball 500 times this year. But Ramondre's got a little pep in his step this camp. And it's not just yesterday. I've noticed that. I haven't really talked about it a ton, but I guess I'll bring it up now. So 2 years ago, he finished, I think it was 8th in the league in touches. He was top 10 last year before he got hurt. And Brian and Mike, having done Patriots beat with me, and Tayler, I think you encountered this with me a little bit. One of my biggest pet peeves the last 2 years was the lack of balance in the backfield. And simply that they were doing Ramondre Stevenson a disservice because they were running him into the ground. And by the time he got to the end of the year, he wasn't the same player. And that's why a lot of these teams that are running back dominant, the Titans under Derrick Henry, the Cowboys under Zeke, they would fall off late in the year because you just can't do that in the modern NFL. Derrick Henry's a little bit, I guess, of an anomaly because he's so big, but the hits you take, it takes a toll. And I always say, people say, oh, so you want Ramondre touching the ball less? He's one of their best players. I think if you give Ramondre Stevenson 200 touches, and touches means catches plus carries. If you give Ramondre Stevenson 200 touches versus, say, 250, right? I think those 200, you're going to get more out of those 200 because he'll be fresher. And I'm just using round numbers here than you will out of the 250. Like the 4 to 5 touches a game add up. Especially, I remember a game a couple years ago against Detroit. I think it was Bailey Zappi's first start where they're up like 3 scores with 2 minutes to go, and they're trying to run out the clock. And it's halfback dive to Ramondre Stevenson, and he's, taking big hits as he goes up the middle. And it's like, no offense to Kevin Harris, but Kevin Harris can't go out there and get knocked around with a 3-score lead with 2 minutes to go. Like, right. Why are you making Ramondre?
I don't think he'd mind.
What?
He doesn't get to play. I don't think he'd mind.
Right. No, if he'd actually see the field, he'd probably enjoy it. So
let him go break one for 6 and then, make a roster the following year or something. Right.
Right. Exactly. So, I think missing time at the end of last season really helped Ramondre Stevenson because he even said, he would tell us, he was kind of at the end of 22, he told us it was getting to him and he was kind of beat down. And then he came right back in 23. Remember, they were managing his workload early in camp. Yeah. But then there were games again, second year in a row, where he was the only healthy active running back at times. So I think missing time last year gave him a chance to just get healthy, get rested. I think he lost a little weight, which is probably good.
But he says the same weight, but he added muscle and lost.
Okay, so redistributed. He looks better.
Like thinner.
I think he said the body fat is down. I think that's
exactly. Yeah. So I just think all of that really is going to help him this year. And you have a guy in Antonio Gibson who the coaching staff should be very comfortable giving a not insignificant workload. I like where things are trending for Ramondre Stevenson right now.
Yeah. Antonio Gibson is what they wanted Zeke to be last year.
Basically,
really is someone who can do everything and run some of the, the downhill and outside zone stuff, a little bit of a mix up there. Also, to your point, Alex, I think the outside zone scheme will help. I did a really deep dive into this when Ramondre was re-signed. Yeah. He is the only back in the past since he was drafted of guys who had a certain number of carries. I think it was 10 guys who were really at the top of the league in yards per carry. Yeah. He's the only one who didn't have outside zone as one of his top run concepts. Everybody else, the worst it was third. Mondre, it's all downhill. It's duo, inside zone, and power. That's just a tough place to live as a running back because you're running right into the teeth of the defense on concepts where a lot of the time there's not a whole lot of pulling guards, where sometimes you have a lead blocker outside zone where you're displacing guys horizontally and it's harder for them to tackle you because sometimes they're having to kind of cut against the grain and go backwards. I think that's going to help him as well.
Any other thoughts on the skill position players?
I think we hit it.
That third tight end spot's still wide open. Yeah, Mitchell Wilcox had a decent day yesterday.
I want to ask you about that, Alex. I didn't fully read your 53-man roster projection, but I saw that you wrote, a veteran tight end as the third guy, and that there's still room to sign one. Who's out there? Do we know?
Let's see if Taylor did his homework. Because
Bro, I got some coffee and I sat in this chair. That has been my morning so
Okay.
far.
You still got homework. I was writing last night, and I knew Taylor was up because I was texting about his appearance on BST. And I'm looking for somebody asked me like that question: what tight end should we look at? And it's so tough this time of year because you got to essentially read like 31 other roster projections. Because I'm not watching every camp. But one name that stood out to me, and I'm a little surprised. I think Taylor is your light go out or something? We still have you, bud?
I don't know what happened. I'll figure it out.
All right. I just want to make sure we still have you. It's like on a video game when the controller dies.
That's so weird. I have no idea.
So I'm looking at it, who's available. I know we all think blocking tight end for third tight end, but I saw this name, Peyton Hendershot in Dallas. Apparently, a lot of people think he's on the outside looking in there. Not a blocker by any means, but he has that yak ability that Van Pelt seems to like in tight ends. That Hunter Henry is more of a get open before the catch guy. Austin Hooper, same thing. So definitely a scheme fit. If they want a blocker, he's not the guy, but that was a name that stood out to me. I don't know if you guys have done any more research on this.
They don't have any blockers anyway, so get somebody who can do something.
Yeah.
My research has been they should have re-signed Pharaoh Brown. That was my
research.
I
mean, that's basically
that was the prime example last year, right? He was a post-camp signing and came in and made the roster and was here all year and played pretty well for himself. I don't hate Hendershot because again, they have Ferguson and then they have they have another tight end there as well. Yeah, Schoonmaker.
And they have Brevin Spanford, who I liked in the draft from Minnesota.
Oh, they drafted too. Okay.
Who I think he's a UDFA, but apparently he's having a very good camp.
Oh, okay.
So
interesting.
Oh, I'm watching Hendershot now real quick. He makes a lot of sense.
Taylor has his entire
real time.
We'll get the film. We'll get the film cut up on Twitter at 11 o'clock.
It'll be before the episode ends. Don't worry.
That'll come on Patriots Daily soon. But before we go here, I do want to talk about the defense. We got 56 minutes. We haven't talked about the defense.
Okay.
And for all the doom and gloom of yesterday, I thought the defense was good. Now I know the numbers for Jalen Hurts are insane. I think he's like 22 of 25 or something, and 11 on 11s. The number of those passes that were 1 yard checkdowns, it's most of them. He never looked comfortable yesterday in the pocket. They got a ton of pressure on him. Matthew Judon was awesome in that practice. He was playing with an incredibly high motor. He was all over the place. They put him in coverage a lot, which I didn't love. But besides that, I thought he had a great day, and that's not his fault. That's just how they're using him. I thought Christian Gonzalez was better. Really good in one-on-ones against AJ Brown. And Jabril Peppers, I thought, had a good day on the back end. So, shocker, the arguably three best defensive players. All right, Taylor, you figure out what the hell is going on there. Arguably, the three best defensive players had the best day, but I don't know if you guys feel. I think I'm the only one who actually watched the defense because Mike and Taylor, even though they're working together, they couldn't figure out. Me and Evan figured out.
Yeah, we had to bring you on.
Watch one field, one person watched the other. I was encouraged by what I saw at the defense yesterday. My big takeaway from yesterday's practice, I'll say this before I open it up to you guys. My big takeaway from yesterday's practice was there was no takeaway. We learned nothing because it was just confirming priors. The offense looked bad because the offensive line. The defense looked good. They looked representative. They look like they can be a top 10, top 5 group. So, I don't want to say I was encouraged by the defense because they were kind of what I thought they were, and I mean that in a good way, Mike.
I'll just add, it's funny you mentioned, not splitting up practice, right? Me and you were standing together for half the practice, and even when we were talking the whole time, my eyes were still on the offense. I didn't even watch the defensive reps you were watching. But I will just add that Jabril Peppers, I thought, was good, and I liked hearing Lane Johnson, a guy respected around the NFL. We love the Patriots defense here, and we love the safeties here, and we talk about Duggar and Peppers all the time. I don't know about the national attention that this team and this defense gets, especially in the back end, but to hear a guy in Lane Johnson, who is a well-respected, very good, tackle in the NFL, to say, not only was their defense awesome, but a guy like Jabril Peppers was flying around. It just goes to show that they do have a legit safety in him, and they got him at a bargain deal too. Like the number they re-signed him at, what he probably could have got more on the open market. So I'm looking forward to that kind of continuing. I thought Dallas Goedert got the best of Kyle Duggar a few times in yesterday's practice, so I do still sometimes wonder about him in coverage. Other than that, I think the defense, from what I saw, and again, frankly, from what you were able to tell us in our stand-up, was pretty good.
Well, I think hopefully Jalen Hawkins, the safety that's covering tight ends, based on what we've seen. And he had a good day yesterday, but just to wedge that in. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I was pretty locked in on the offense too, but every time I looked over, I felt like I saw Matthew Judon running around in coverage or pressuring Jalen Hurts. So he was active and looked like Matthew Judon. So that was good to see. Mike, you mentioned Peppers, right? Like the Patriots released that social media video where you literally saw him running a few guys over. So Peppers looks like Peppers. And yeah, the run defense too. Barth, I thought that looked pretty good. You might have had a better read. Devon Godshaw looked pretty good up front. So, Philly's big running team. They have Saquon. I thought the run defense held up pretty well up front there as well.
All right. I don't know if Taylor's coming back or not, but I'll bump it over to special teams real quick. If he comes back, we'll talk defense with him. No field goals yesterday, so we didn't get an update on that. But, and this is where it's tough because the rule's so new that like you don't necessarily know what to make of what you're seeing, even if you see something right in front of you. So whether this is more about the Patriots, more about the Eagles, you guys can tell me if you have an opinion. I would say I don't know, just because we haven't seen enough of it yet. The Patriots. So real quick, Patriots return team I thought looked solid. Jalen Reagor looked like the best returner. So if he makes a team, I think that's his job. I do want to focus on the Patriots kickoff unit though, because they gave the Eagles actual trouble. There were only about 5 or 6 kickoffs in that period. One, they came down the field, forced a fumble. Another, they did a squib kick, like a line drive kick to the side that disoriented. I don't remember who the Eagles returner was, but disoriented the returner to a point where he actually fielded the ball on a bounce with his right foot out of bounds at like the 2 or 3 yard line.
Yeah.
And that's where that ball is. That ball is now on the 3. And then they had another squib kick that I thought was going to do the same thing, but a scrum broke out, which to me tells me that Eagles return team was frustrated by what was going on. So is that more about the Eagles not being ready for the kickoff? Is that about the Patriots maybe having figured something out? Is it both? Again, this thing's so new. To me, it's impossible to say. You guys maybe feel differently, but I chalk it up. Patriots kickoff team was good yesterday. Like that, I feel like I can say.
Yeah, definitely. The Raekwon McMillan like lit someone up on that fumble, and then Jermichael Hasty returned it. They had the one downed at the 1-2 yard line was impressive because it was one of those kind of funky. It wasn't the ball flat on the tee, but it kind of had that same like ball path where it was a little lower and it had a little curve, so it made him field it in a funky way. And then the scrum, which looked like an Eagles guy hit Joshua Uche late, so maybe some frustration there. So it was a impressive. Again, it was only 5-6 attempts there, but it was impressive from the kickoff coverage team there.
And there were some big hits by the Patriots in the return game, some blocks too. Highlight that. Mike, go ahead.
Leaving special teams to Patriots beat as we normally do. I'll just add that it was nice to see Isaiah Bolden get some reps as a kick returner. I look forward to that because of, again, how good. I feel like I've said this a ton, but because of how good he was in college, I think that getting him in the mix there is something that I personally, I think I would rather Bolden as again, we haven't seen it, and Jalen Reagor's been great, and I think you mentioned it too, Alex, where he's been probably their best kick returner, but I like Bolden's upside on defense as much as or better than I like Reagor's upside on offense. So if Bolden could be serviceable kick returner and, bring that I guess magic back, I look forward to see him getting some real reps there eventually.
Real quick on this comment, who gives a damn about special teams? We suck offensively. We're the worst in football. We have the worst line in NFL history. And you're talking about special teams. One, if you don't know why we're talking about special teams, congratulations for finding Patriots beat for the first time ever. 2, we don't have the worst line in history. Drew Bledsoe's doing a fantastic job out there at double back. So quick thoughts on that. And we have Taylor back, which is great. So we did defense and special teams kind of real quick there. Thoughts on, I guess we'll go defense first, Taylor, if you have a thought on the defense from yesterday.
Yeah, I know you guys kind of covered it, but Mike and I were locked in on the offense, as everybody wants to talk about. But yeah, Jabril Peppers banging down there. Lane Johnson, for an offensive lineman to say that a safety was making an impact, like that tells you a lot. Devon Godshaw also, from everything I've heard, was just a monster in the middle. In that Patriots video that they put on Twitter, you could also see it. There was a play that he made for a tackle. So again, I don't want to, act like I was watching the defense the whole time. I wasn't. Also, the fact that A.J. Brown shouted out Christian Gonzalez and said that was the guy I thought was the best DB in that draft class, and he was competitive against him. I think the only play that I saw Gonzalez give up was that slant in the red zone where it's like, yeah, A.J. Brown on a red zone slant, he's going to win that like 75% of the time. He's massive and he's an elite player. But yeah, those were, I guess, the standouts for me. Special teams, Raekwon McMillan and Jermichael Hasty like killed a couple guys.
Yeah, in the return game.
Yeah, like Raekwon's, that was another one in the video the Patriots had. That ended in a fumble that Hasty, I think, actually recovered for what would have been a touchdown.
Yeah.
And Hasty was a lead blocker on one return and buried somebody. So those were a couple that stood out for me.
And I'll just clear this up. I think I misspoke there, and I said that the Eagles returner fielded the ball with his foot out of bounds. It was more like his momentum. He picked it up right near the sideline. Yeah, he was in bounds, but his momentum was carrying him, and he stepped out of bounds, but like he didn't realize, try to come back in. It was a tough ball to field, basically. And the reason that he fielded it, and some people say, why didn't he let it go out of bounds? The way, I actually don't remember who was on that kickoff. It was Ryland or Sly. Brian, maybe you remember.
No, I don't.
That would be good to know for the kicker battle. Whoever kicked it. So it's a touchback if the ball lands in the end zone and rolls out of bounds or goes over the end zone. If the ball that's a 30-yard touchback. If the ball lands in the landing zone, makes it to the end zone untouched, then it's a 20-yard touchback. So if you're not positive that ball is going to go out of bounds, you want to pick it up because you're going to cost your team 10 yards. And it was one of those. It probably wasn't going to roll out of bounds. It needed to be fielded. But it was right next to the sideline, and the momentum in picking the ball up, like he picked it up, and then his next step, he was out of bounds because he had to really sprint to get to it. And that's what happened. So just clarifying that. I don't believe they changed. I know the rule you're talking about there. Was that Ty Montgomery or Randall Cobb who made that play where like he lied down out of bounds then reached out and touched the ball?
I think it was Ty Montgomery.
I believe that rule is still in place. We actually had the refs yesterday. Could have asked them. And I wanted to close with that before we wrap it up here. Because we did, I don't know. Oh, you guys didn't because you're getting ready for your big flag football game. With Sean Smith, who's a head referee in the NFL, crew chief in the NFL, gave the media presentation on basically some of the rule changes. Most of what he told us with the kickoff, I think, is already out there. The one thing that he said that, actually, Brian, you were there for this. The one thing he said that we had talked about on Patriots Beat the other day was they may continue to tweak the kickoff rule into the regular season. So that's just something to be aware of if they notice they missed something or there's a glaring loophole they need to fill. The other thing he said was he clarified the hip drop tackle rule, which I thought added some important information. Because if you remember, we did a bunch of shows when they passed that, like, what the hell are they doing? This is terrible. And he talked about there's 3 things that need to happen for a tackle to be a penalty under the hip drop rule. So it's wrap at the waist, position your body, like move yourself to position yourself behind the ball carrier, and then they call it unweight yourself, which is basically go limp. And when you do that, that's when you get these plays where guys fall on the back of ball carriers' legs, and that's where the injuries happen. And the term he used was it has to be clear and complete, basically meaning all 3 elements have to be present for the flag to be thrown. So wrapping guy up around the waist and pulling him down, that's not a clear and complete hip drop tackle. That's just one of the 3. The other thing he mentioned, and this is what really stood out to me, was they can fine players for hip drop tackles even if they weren't called in the game. And that, to me, they've done this before with different rules. Remember a couple years ago, the lowering the helmet thing that everybody thought was going to ruin the game? That's how they're going to police this. They're not going to call it in the game unless it's egregious, but they're going to go back and look at the film and find guys who are doing it more than they want it done. And that's how it's going to be policed. And if they are going to enforce this, that's how you do it without letting it impact the game too much. So that was my takeaway. Like, I'm not saying that's definitely what they're doing, but reading between the lines of what he said, that's kind of the vibe I got, that unless it's egregious, it won't be called, but you might hear from the league. I'm okay with that.
That's a good way to police it too, like you said, because again, it doesn't impact your team as much, right? If there's a fluky one that, again, maybe not all 3
now until the Patriots lose a game because it's not called, and then the fine comes out.
Yeah,
like,
that's fair.
They did it.
That's a good point. I didn't think of it that way. If it's the reverse, but if you're, it's a 4th down in a 1-score game and you can't really tell and they throw the flag anyway, it's like, oh, what the hell? But then if you just find the guy and he knows what to do and what not to do later, I guess that makes a little bit more sense, and it helps not ruin the fan experience, but still, I guess, take an unsafe play out of the game.
Any thoughts from you guys on the rule changes?
Not really.
All right. Well, then there we go. That'll do it for this crossover.
That's a show.
Patriots Daily and Patriots Beat. Again, we're up to like 2,000 people watching right now. So thanks to everybody across all the streams. I know none of you see that number individually. I have it across YouTube and all our different individual Twitter accounts. So thanks, everybody got up, tuned in this morning. Thanks to you guys for getting up and doing the show because I couldn't do it yesterday after the football game. The next show,
We wouldn't have been able to either.
That's true. Yeah, it would have been awkward. Oh, we literally wouldn't have been able to. You're right.
I
We wouldn't have
know.
anybody set it up. So that all being said, the next shows, Taylor, do you have anything tomorrow pregame?
We'll end up doing a pregame show, I think.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna do
Okay.
something.
So there'll be a Patriots Daily pregame with Mike and Taylor from the stadium. Me and Brian will be back some point on Friday. Probably going to be mid-afternoonish. I'm on the hub Friday morning, so Brian will talk about that. In the meantime, Mike and Taylor, you can read them on clnsmedia.com, Brian on patspulpit.com. You can read me on 98.5thesportshub.com. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. Enjoy the game tomorrow, and we'll talk to you post-game. Taylor, you want to say your thing?
Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time.
There we go.
In a minute.